All right. So let's jump right in, David. 2 Corinthians 4:4, please.
The God of this age has blinded the minds of the unbelievers, so they cannot see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God.
Right. And the 2:8.
Let no one disqualify you, insisting on ascetic practices and the worship of angels, claiming access to a visionary realm and inflated without cause by his fleshy mind.
Okay, now let's keep in mind. They only had these epistles from Colossians, so they didn't have what he had written to them. But what is that? In this age, he talks about these two things. I like the NASB. The NASB, instead of disqualifying you, it says defrauding you. What does that mean, you did?
Defrauding you, tricking you, giving you false information. What does it mean to you?
You being the teacher, right? Paul's saying how you and you and you and you into believing these other things. Remember all those circles, all those different forces, all those, ones that are trying to influence them at this time. So Paul's writing, David, don't let anyone disqualify, defraud you into believing that you can connect with God. So this is a new concept, right? So the reason the author of this study called it the Mystery Series is, at the time, this is a new concept, right? You can connect with the Lord directly through his sacred text, directly through the Holy Spirit, directly through prayer. We talk about it because it's a common thing for us, right? But in the early church, this was totally novel and totally new. But he also said, you have to fight off all this noise. You ever remember 2 Kings, right? When Elijah stood on, outside, and then he didn't hear God in the thunder, and in the earthquake, and in the lightning, and in the storm, but he heard God how? In the storm place. Yeah. Still small. So, what are some tactics the villain and false teachers use today to draw us away from the freedom and the life that's found in the larger story? What about my people online? 3 minutes, you guys have anything to tune us? John. Things that we're doing wrong. Anthony, were you going to say something?
Yeah, but then I realized somebody in the room was talking, and so I stopped.
It's okay. He's yielding the floor.
And obviously this is based on personal experience, but the thing that I have seen most, as far as false teachers drawing us away from the freedom and the life, is we have a tendency to focus on how salvation is so easy. And because it is easy, we end up with this thought that we somehow don't deserve it. And that's kind of the whole point. We don't deserve it. And there's nothing we can do to deserve salvation on ourselves, but that tends not to sit well with us. And so we end up with some variation of works-based salvation, whether through the concept that we can potentially lose our salvation if we aren't performing good works up to a certain standard, often are very arbitrary, or if if we are living in sin or aren't performing these good works, then maybe we never were saved. And so often what I have seen attacked is the concept of eternal security, and that if you've gotten saved, there's nothing you can do that can separate you from the love of God. And we get drawn into this idea of, if we're saved, then we have to be doing all these good things, and we should, but we don't have to, and our salvation is not reliant upon that. And so I've seen a lot of that in a lot of different flavors, but that's what I've seen the most of.
For those of you who couldn't hear, it was how,
You're muted, Mike.
there are people at that time that are trying to pound works-based salvation, and they're trying to pound these work, and all these other things. And it's also network. So this one may continue to have problems as they're upgrading the system.
The biggest thing is,
So thank you guys. Be patient. I know that the stream is going to be tight for a while until they upgrade the internet. But let's keep going. So in his book, The Great Divorce, C.S. Lewis says that heaven, right, collectively heaven, all that we are doing, is not a state of mind. Heaven's a reality itself. Heaven, all that is fully real is heaven. For all of that, and only the unshakable remains. So he's trying to encourage people in The Great Divorce and say, guys, there are all these forces that are going to try to distract you, just like those circles we talked about, right? So many external forces, right? And we have to stay connected to the Word so that, we are not shaken. Let's go on. The purple group, Sarah, if you could read for us first Colossians 1:27 and Ecclesiastes.
God has chosen to make known among the Gentiles the glorious riches of this mystery, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. And then Ecclesiastes is, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end.
Do these seem connected? Or they seem disconnected? They seem connected?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the mystery and the cannot fathom connects them. It's like it's a mystery, that hope of glory, that everything that God has done. Our brains are just so feeble that we can't even comprehend any of that.
I like this version, so just to do a little bit of exegesis here. Here, glory doxas is the translation of the Greek word. It is not the noun saying that, the glory of God shall be seen. Right? It's just kind of like the Old Testament when he talks about God's Shekinah glory, or, we talked about the glory of this or the glory of that. That's not the word here. So there are about 6 different uses of the word in the Greek in the New Testament. So the word here is about a state of being, right? So doxas, the way it's used here, is the glory, the hope of glory is God's very nature. It's the essence of who God is, right? And what Paul is saying, which at the time is really, really new, is that right there, right? Christ in you is the hope of glory. So, it's totally different, right? Christ and John and Ryan, and it's that hope.
Good to see
And
people.
so-
I'm glad to see people here. Well,
Thank you.
Today.
So I'm glad it doesn't seem like a dichotomy. Because, sometimes, these are very different in trying to understand that he's not talking about, right? He's not talking about something high up in heavenly. He's being very, which back to the concept of the entire study is a very mysterious concept. Well, I am a reflection of the Lord. This is new, right? This is something that we, in terms of sanctification and discipleship, we have to get into our children. When you leave my house, are a reflection of our family. You, when you leave the church, are a reflection of Jesus Christ. Right? And he's saying this to the entire church. Hey, Colossae, you are a reflection of God. And you're the embodiment of him. And you are his glory. Right? So there was this entire dichotomy that was going on at the time. This is your old self and everything that you guys are dealing with, and this is your new self. Right? This is what he talked about in 3:18, when we covered 2 weeks ago. Right? And mercy and generosity, forgiveness and love. And oh, by the way, 3:18, there is no what? Greek or Jew, male or female, slave or free. Right? So forget Black Lives Matter. Paul in 78 AD was hammering it home. All lives matter. And all my lives matter in Christ. Right? So here in 127, what Sarah just read was just getting them to understand it. Right? You are the hope of glory. You are the glory of God. You are the living embodiment of what Jesus. So you are to take this. And you are to go. Be his hands and feet. Right? Which is a very mysterious concept at the time. That glory, that glory in you as you try to care. This part's a lot of kumbaya.
Yeah, right.
It's the my teacher guy.
Yeah.
You came up with that,
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You knew I drew that. Yeah, the only thing I can draw is Thomas the Train. So. And then finally, Hannah, if you could read the 2 green verses from Colossians 1 and 3.
May you be strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, for all endurance and patience with joy, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of the saints in the light. Colossians 3:1, at God's right hand. Think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. For you died to this life, and your real life is hidden with Christ in God. And when Christ, who is your life, is revealed to the whole world, you will share in all his glory.
Colossae just got their epistle. There is no such thing as revelation yet. There is no such understanding. There's some of it that we get from the epistles to John and then, 1st and 2nd Peter and stuff like that. But at that time, this whole concept of, we hear a little bit, Matthew 28:30, right? And lo, I will return again. So Jesus had made some of those promises. But remember, to the early church in all of Asia Minor, and the entire Roman Empire, everywhere, Greece, Rome, everyone, when they're receiving this, there is a mystery of what on earth is going to happen. Yes, he is the Messiah. We saw him die. We saw him come back to life. But what is this thing that we will reign with him in glory again? What is this again? What would you think if you were the early church reading this?
Has been a mystery, it's hard to fathom because we're human and can't fathom those things. Jesus, to come as Messiah, comprehend that. So they don't.
Well, I think it's strange to think about these things being such a mystery to them because they got to see like Christ come back and raise other people from the dead and like him raise himself, and then to get told like this is gonna happen again. Like if I was in the church, I would be just waiting for it to happen. Like I don't know when it's gonna be there, but hopefully it'll be there soon. And we like don't, you know, we didn't get to physically see these things happening, but we, you know, you just have to have more faith that it's gonna come back and happen again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I also feel like even though they've seen some of that, like they saw Jesus, they saw things, we've seen so many things and we forget, or we don't, or we think it's, oh, that's not gonna happen again, or it's like the magnitude of what it was, we just forget it, and so we don't, like our faith, we don't really believe that it could happen again, or that, I don't know, we're stupid. You know, I feel like we just don't really, he proves himself so many times and we still don't get it.
Or maybe that just makes us human.
Yeah.
Because the gospel is full of stories of both Old Testament and New Testament where God shows himself, they forget, God shows himself, they forget. That entire arc of the Old Testament, the entire arc of the New Testament, God shows himself, they forget. And that's just our flawed humanity. Let's give ourselves some grace because we will screw up and we will forget God. And Paul's trying to encourage them as much as he can, but he knows they're going to fail.
I'm sorry for calling everyone stupid. I'm in that too.
So this is the hard question here, is how do we live as citizens of heaven with our sights set on heaven realities, we're trying to still just survive this mess, this craziness that we've been going through. And I'm not talking about the last 6 months, I'm talking about just this craziness of life, right? Paul's trying to do the exact same thing in the first century when he wrote to the Colossians. You guys have to figure out this life. Forget if you're hearing from your polytheistic mother-in-law and your atheist father-in-law and your crazy, temple worshiping, neighbor. How do you live as a Christian in these times?
Andrew, how do you juggle like being, a believer in these times for you?
A believer in these times for you?
It hasn't been really too difficult. It seems this sort of seems like it's happened before, and we just have gotten so used to like pandemics not being a thing because of medicine, and it doesn't shake my faith in God at all.
Bravo.
What do you say?
So, it's happened before. He's saying it doesn't change his faith. And I look at a guy like Andrew, and obviously, look, we know Andrew's history. He grew up here in the church. His parents are here in the church, and he's plugged into a system, right? We text. We're part of the same thing, and that's a lot. So he's writing to the Colossian church about how important that is, and being and belonging and contributing, and because how do you do it if you don't do it together? Right. Ryan, you're giving me some interesting books here. Any thoughts?
Nothing to add. Just taking it in.
I think about how hard it is for the people that haven't been able to come in, right? We had dear friends that, were pregnant and they gave birth right in the middle of, I think she gave birth in June or July, so bad days. But, towards the end of her pregnancy, her pediatrician scared her to death, right? And so between the OB-GYN and the pediatrician, like, they locked up. Like, they stayed home, they didn't go out, and it was just so hard for her to connect. And, I just encourage you guys so much that if you guys know people that are still in that situation and, they have to isolate for one reason or another, that you guys are reaching out to them, right? Because they need that community. They need, to know that people are praying for them. They need this. I can't tell you how depressing it was when I'm here teaching, and the only thing in front of me is Kyle Stahl. I love Kyle. I love him. But
John is here too.
it's a lot easier like when you're teaching, you work in a room as a teacher. It's a lot easier when there's 14 faces in front of me. There was a week where it was just John. We were connecting.
Exciting.
It was an exciting week. But this is what Ken Heck was getting to when he wrote the study, right? Ken Heck was the author of the study, and it was just the whole concept of hope. And ironically, look, when Charlie and I picked the study, it had nothing at all to do because we didn't know that pastor was going to be preaching on hope for 8 weeks. But hope is the primary theme of the book of Colossians, and hope is the antidote for life because life is messy and brings us many hardships, just like it did to the first century Colossians, just like it is just now. And in hindsight, once we reach heaven, it's going to be obvious that we spent way too much time and energy focused on insubstantial issues of our smaller stories. Larger story issues of Christ's kingdom and people in eternity will carry the day. And I think of Matthew 5, right? When he talks about the lilies of the field and the birds of the air, and how God cares for them. And how I know Matthew 5 since I was, probably 8 or 9. I knew Matthew 5 from before I was ever a believer. So God's still teaching me, not to dwell in it every day, because what do I worry about as a man? I'm still worrying about my job and pay and covering the bills. And, I forget the bigger picture sometimes. And, I study this stuff on Tuesday, and then Saturday night, God will whack me up the head and say, you didn't get it this week. And then just 2 verses as takeaways. 3:23, right, was the primary verse for today, that whatever you do, work with all your heart, right, as working for the Lord and not for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. And then Ephesians 3. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have the power, together with all the saints, to grasp how wide and how long and how high and how deep is the love of Christ, and to know that that love surpasses knowledge, and that you may be filled with measure of all fullness of God. Right? Next week, right? We start Isaiah. Right, which is interesting, which I kind of love. You guys voted on this in the middle of the summer, but what I love is Isaiah is preaching to the people at a time when everything goes wrong. Right? We start off the story next week. We'll start right off in Jerusalem, and then what happens about Isaiah is, is the prophets of the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom falls, and they get pulled off. They get pulled off by the Assyrians, right? Thank you. And it's a fun journey and hope. And there's a reason we finish up around Christmas time, because what do all of his prophecies end up being about? The hope that they have, the hope for the Jewish people, the oncoming Messiah. Right? So that will be our fall study. Right? So I will stop this, and Michael, do